Is it important that these economic powers that the president has and has abused will come up in a test sometime in the future? Unlikely. It won't be on Wordle or Threads or any of those things that you and we all maybe play or ignore. It's important because it's the U.S. Supreme Court, and it's a case that's been talked about a lot. And the decision, what is it? If you were looking for the channel that was going to extol the virtues of IEPA, then perhaps you came to the wrong place. What I want to do is give just a quick what it does mean in kind of in the black letter sense, but then in the larger sense of Supreme Court gamesmanship, which there's been a lot, and there is what the kids would say a shit ton more to come. So we're going to have to buckle up for that. Was it? Was this 6-3 Supreme Court decision with Chief Justice Roberts writing the opinion, the liberal justices and some petulant dudes named Thomas and we'll talk about the Kavanaugh dissent, because the the only thing important, sometimes the dissents are important, who wrote them and what they say. I'm going to just touch on this before I blow past it, because the way that I read the dissent, and there's a lot here that I haven't read. It's 170 pages, something to that effect. Kavanaugh, the ding against him, or one of them, besides inappropriate sexual contact prior to his being confirmed, is the Kavanaugh stops. So a lot of appropriate shade went on his name, and he wants to write a dissent that screams to the world that I matter, and I'm also sort of campaigning for the job of Chief Justice when Roberts retires. Like, I want to be seen as a broad-minded intellectual, but he was really just blowing a little smoke at DJT and blowing his own horn. Giving himself a couple layups. What did we learn from the case? We relearned that the authority to tax rests solely with the legislative branch, right? That wasn't something we needed to relearn, and it really wasn't something that the Supreme Court was likely to try to relitigate, an issue like a core principle like that. But the reason, you have to look at the beginning of each year. Why did the Supreme Court choose to hear the cases that they chose to hear? Right? Because you don't have a constitutional right to demand that the Supreme Court hears your case. Donald J. Trump believes that he has a God-given right, although he doesn't believe in God. He believes he has an absolute right because he's a monarch, that he can call the Supreme Court and get them to rule in his favor. They did not rule in his favor today, but I would argue that the more important issue, the outcome of this case was determined before the Supreme Court agreed to even hear the case. That is my position. It is not my position alone, but what they are doing is they're setting the table. And they looked at this case and they said, we need to not to demonstrate, because that would mean there was some truth involved. We need to showcase the possibility that we, as the Supreme Court, are indeed fair and balanced, to steal a line from a disreputable broadcaster, right? That we can be open-minded and we're not driven by ideology, right? So they look at this case when they're deciding which cases they'll take, say, you know what, this is this is like black letter law, constitutional. It's there. There ain't much ambiguity here. You know, there's no strict construction. You know, the plain meaning of what the founders meant 300 years ago. What is a boat? You know, nothing as complicated or esoteric as that. The outcome of this was predetermined. This meant that the president does not have the power to tax. That's the Congress. What does that mean more broadly? I've been listening to a lot of opinions today, and some people that have a great deal more optimism than I do in the Supreme Court's willingness to put the reins on DJT. That you know the one of the many arguments that I've heard more than once is that they're reining him in. They're they're slapping him down. It's near the end for Trump 2.0 because the Supreme Court made a principled stand in America's, we're back. Bullshit. Not happening. That's not what this meant at all. What the court was doing is it was giving itself I'm gonna use some highly technical legal terms right now. The Supreme Court was giving themselves sort of a hand job, if you will, right? They want to make themselves feel good. That's what John Roberts was doing here. And really what he wants to say to people is look at us being fair. Look back at the shadow docket where we did everything except fellate the president. Almost everything except fellate the president in the shadow docket. One went after another. People say, yeah, but when they went back into the term, then it was different, and they stood their ground and they were fair. No. The shadow docket abuse in this past year, what they did in this past summer of 25, was absolutely repulsive and antithetical to the Constitution, to rule of law, to accepted norms, and a whole list of other things that the Roberts Court is blowing up, right? But they saw this and they said, you know what? We can fly the flag, not upside down, like Alito's wife, but we're going to fly the flag for the Supreme Court, and by making this decision, publishing it proudly, saying we stood up against Donald Trump's unbridled attempts to impose executive power in every blah blah blah, right? And it's bullshit. It's bullshit. So, what does it mean practically with this case? It's not. This is not sexy stuff, right? What you will hear commentators talking about today about the impracticability, the impractical nature of refunding all of the tariffs. Now, Trump has at least five other vehicles, if you will, um, five other ways to impose tariffs. And in fact, I think the part of the title of today's podcast was "And Trump Needs a Diaper Change," because he has to be indignant and has to jump up and down and scream about grievance and that they did a bad it's part of the this is the charade. This is the drama, right? You guys are so terrible. Do you see how the Supreme Court was mean to me, Donald J. Trump, the president of the United States? Do you understand the power that I have and that the Supreme Court had the nerve to rule against me, which is part of the setup, right? Hand in hand with the Supreme Court. And then we get to important cases, Calais and otherwise, voting rights, and the cases that are going to come up in, emergency dockets, diaper dockets, vape dockets, whatever you want to call them, emergency, everything in Donald Trump's world is an emergency. And that's kind of at the basis of today's ruling too, is many commentators today were saying that, and what this will do also is it will chasten the president, that he can't just by calling something an emergency or terrorism or some other dire complaint or cry or scream or whine. Uh, just by virtue of that, this ruling will teach Donald J. Trump that just by calling it an emergency doesn't give him the authorization to do whatever he wants. That's not what this did today, though. This will not chasten him. While we're talking here, he could quite plausibly be bombing Iran. Could be happening right this minute. I don't know that it is. We have, two carrier battle groups and other assets and hundreds of planes and all sorts of, the help of intelligence services of neighboring countries, all there ready to go. Are we going to, excuse me, not we, is your president, Donald J. Trump, going to build all that up and then do nothing? Does that sound, uh, you know, characterologically consistent with his behavior, what we've seen? I mean, forget about the last 10 years for his entire life. He's an entitled, spoiled guy, you know? He, he wants what he wants. He believes he's right, and he doesn't believe that anybody has the power to stop him. That's why we need the Supreme Court. And, you know, if I want to look on the positive side, that even with this charade that they played today with IEPA, at least they did it, right? There is a world where the conservatives on the court, you flip a couple the other direction, and they could have given him this because we have to give him every victory that he asks for. And then we're full on constitutional crisis and probably a lot closer to civil conflict than we thought we would be. But Roberts apparently is still concerned about his well-being, his legacy. What I thought, years ago when he was elevated to Chief Justice, I thought he was concerned about the legacy of the Supreme Court itself. You know, you look at people like Jerome Powell, who behaves with the utmost of dignity at the Fed. Of course, he's human. He's concerned about his legacy, which is secure as it can be. He's 70 or whatever. Utmost dignity and a brilliant man who has always acted in the country's best interest. You can disagree with his decision to raise the rate, raise interest rates, lower interest rates, or hold steady on in every single meeting. You can disagree. That's your right to do so. But just show me an example of somebody else that has dealt with the circumstances that he was handed, and did a better job. And I'll wait and keep waiting for that exam. But I thought that, Chief Justice Roberts, you look at his pedigree, and I don't mean the Harvard. I mean, the way that he came up. There wasn't any question. He's a conservative justice, as advertised, as he was back in. I mean, his service goes back to Reagan. Reagan too, right? That he was first working for the government at that point, before he was elevated to the courts. Everybody knew what they were going to get from a conservative justice. He made no secret about his feelings regarding executive power throughout his entire career. Right? So we knew what we were going to get in that respect. But I really thought that somewhere in the back of his mind, that he would have a greater deal of respect for the legacy of the Supreme Court itself. True, when you have a fractious, destructive leader like Donald J. Trump, there's perhaps, if the Supreme Court Chief Justice were someone to the more progressive side of the ledger, there might be a. It's starting to snow while I'm sitting out here. That's fun. Might have the uh, I distracted by the beautiful snow. Might be inclined. A more progressive Chief Justice might be more inclined to try to overcorrect if there were a fascistic president, an authoritarian in the Oval Office. Right? But we won't have that problem for quite some time. You know, I thought that John Roberts would have enough respect for the office, for the court, for himself, to play it more straight down the middle. Conservative guy, conservative interests, conservative causes, great. And he has Alito pulling him, and Clarence Thomas doing whatever under the robe, and Coke cans, and the tremendous corruption, and the fact that they don't have any transparency. They've got a lot of problems to deal with, right? But they have some smart younger justices. Kavanaugh, despite the stops, is not a dope. Amy Coney Barrett, brilliant young lady, excuse me, young woman. Gorsuch, qualified, and then the three ladies on the right side of the law are all there to help us. I'm just I won't over I won't try to make today's decision more than it is. Good victory for the Constitution and for democracy to remind the executive branch that the taxing authority rests with the legislative branch. And if there had not been the number of alternative routes for the president to impose tariffs, I would argue that this would not be the outcome that we got today, because Justice Roberts can say, hands off. I get the kind of win I need today, and the president can jump up and down, scream bloody murder, say that this is reactionary, activist judge, whatever bullshit he wants to try to sell today. Roberts can sit back with the conservative members that he cloisters with and say, we caused Trump an inconvenience, but it's in exchange for being able to do the far more horrible things that he wants done in the remaining years of his term. So that is we're writing ourselves a permission slip. We're creating our own permission structure, if you will. And by doing this in a year or less, at the end of the term, when they're dealing with more consequential issues, I will argue, like voting rights, the Calais, which I mentioned, which will, depending on the final decision, will eviscerate the remainder of the Voting Rights Act or render it so debilitated that it's essentially gone. So, and so many other cases, you know, the what that will result in is we're going to lose some representation, some safe Democratic Party seats in the South are going to be wiped out, not for this election, not for the midterms, but for 28. So that it matters. But hopefully, the pounding that we give the Republicans in the midterms is so profound, and we can sustain it and back it up that the margin of victory will be so massive in the House. I mean, but everything it swings back and forth. How long can we manage that and not just win, but keep the trophy? So I'm happy with the outcome today. I'm covering it today just because it's a Supreme Court case and it's in the zeitgeist and people are chatting about it. And I just want to, if the short title for me would be have a beer, but not a feast, right? This is not a cause for celebration. You can say something good happened today, telling the executive branch taxes are not your biz. But the larger issues, what the Supreme Court is how it is setting itself up for the permission to rule in favor of the president more frequently on more important cases. That's that's the loss there today. So, in any case, so that's IEPA, and that's today, and the snow, which is appearing more as sleet right now at this moment. We're supposed to get 2-3 inches tonight, and then so I've heard that Sunday we're going to get another banger. So I'm about over the whole snow thing. We've had plenty. It's pretty and all that kind of stuff, but you get to the point when you get through the halfway point of February. It's we're still there is still almost 2 feet of snow on the ground from the last storm. So anything we get will be insult to injury. But it's if I know that there are a lot of people out in the political world right now that are in favor of the color white. So if you're a fan of whitey, then that's this is a good time for you. Winter, snowflake, a lot of snowflakes, a lot of snowflakes. And that just thinking of snowflake when I woke up late this morning at 4:40, whatever. I was planning on talking about the increased use of surveillance and required disclosures to visitors to the country and within almost every aspect of the immigration and naturalization process. Where if you are filing to change your immigration status, you're in an approved process, then you haven't been locked up and driven to flown to El Salvador, and you're coming to visit. What if you're coming for World Cup? And we're going to be doing tons of World Cup stuff because not so much the soccer slash football, exciting for some folks, but my football season's over for the year. What I from a business perspective, what is the impact of Trump's ill-conceived and poorly executed policies? What are the impacts on American business? What are the impacts on, particularly on small business? Right? There are winners and losers in Trump 2.0. The do the restaurants that allow ICE agents to patronize their establishments get a ICE bump? I would say in the long run, probably not, because the local community will look at that and say, "What the fuck are you doing?" Or something similar to that. And there's all that, in the lodging, hospitality, all the, and then all of the retail and the other Airbnb, whatever it is that you're, wherever you derive your income. How is the Trump immigration policy going to impact your bottom line with World Cup 2026? Excuse me, the criminals and criminals, arsonists, and corrupt politicians would want me to say FIFA World Cup 2026, because it's kind of like the you can't say Super Bowl unless you're at the Super Bowl or whatever that bullshit is. So yeah, but the FIFA, corrupt organization, World Cup 2026, which is in here in the United States, here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but at the southern end of the state, while I am at the northern end of it, and in Canada and in Mexico. What is the we've talked, can't remember if we did a pod about it or whether I wrote a piece about it months and months ago. But it's something, the GDP impact to the economies of the particular countries is something, conservatively, like, for it's a, this is not an all year event either. This is a discrete uh, special event, is $4 billion for the US, 2 billion for Canada, and 1.75 for Mexico, or some real money. And again, I'm not worried about Target and McDonald's. I'm not worried about large national chains at all. What I'm worried about is the mom and pops. What the 75% of job creation wherever we are now in Trump COVID AI world, but the enormous percentage of jobs that are created in the U.S. economy every year, call it three quarters, are created by small business. Right? So, and those people don't have they've they've been counting on that income from World Cup for years, because they've known it for years. They've been planning, and now they're struggling to get. I'm sure they're having a hard time getting staffed up, like many people are. But what is the impact on if you're in a city, down in the southern part of Massachusetts where the Patriots play their home games? Is there a chance that there's going to be large contingents of ICE stormtroopers waiting to greet and tech check visitors as they come out of the stadium? I doubt it. Wouldn't expect that. It doesn't make sense. But if you go by that metric, what makes sense? then we wouldn't be doing any of this freaking shit in any, in any case. So we can't apply logic, reason, or intelligence to the evaluation of what the Trump administration is doing. We just have to take it for what it is. We have to take him at his word, which is silly too, for somebody who lies from dusk till dawn, you know, because he's a late night guy, and then back to dusk again. This is a guy who is just loves hearing his own voice, but doesn't care what comes out of his own mouth. So we have, the World Cup is going to be, it's going to be a trick. We have, looking 2 years down the line, we have the Olympics right now coming from beautiful Italy. I thought that JD and the other MAGA silly people were assailing that lovely young skier who was born in the United States of mixed parentage, one Chinese and one American, and chose to represent China. I won't be able to pull up her name now because I've been hit on the head with snowflakes and I'm unable to respond that quickly. But I posted something about her a couple days ago. Watching her ski. She was 22 years old, going faster backwards on skis than I've ever gone forwards in my entire life. And that's been a long time because I found out, I've been told by reliable sources that if you don't see, then getting on skis going downhill fast, there are trees and things, and it's not advisable. So that that portion of my outdoor activity has been canceled for some extended period of time. Yeah. So in any case, I am now getting well off of the game plan. IEPA good, IEPA bad, don't care. Do you need to learn about IEPA? No, do not do that. Do not waste any of your time learning what IEPA does. What you need to know is what how the Supreme Court rolls, and the way the Supreme Court rolls is like any other. I was going to say criminal enterprise, but that's not really fair. They are, we'll call them like any other political enterprise. What they want to do is they want to stack the deck in their favor. Here's an analogy for those of you that have any interest in sports. University of Florida or some other popular perennial top 10 college college football team, you know, Tulane, Bama, whomever, right? At the beginning of their season, you'll see, you'll pick up I was going to say pick up the paper. Jeez, just in that. You will look at the schedule when it's released and you'll say, I wonder why the first two games are against Cape Cod Tech and James Newton Senior High School. This is a top 10 team. They came in fourth last year. They need the wins and they want to ease into the season and they don't want to have they don't want their momentum stopped before it started. They want to ease into the season, right? And this is sort of, this is not the beginning of the term, right? Clearly, this is not the beginning of the term, but it's an important, they put layups in there amongst the 3-pointers. How's that? Another sports analogy? Great. Good for me. That they need to have the layups in order to balance everything out. And what they're dealing with is a hyper sensitive person who carries a grievance longer than is healthy for his heart in Donald J. Trump. And so they can't speak truth to him and they can't say no to him too much because he'll be sad and you don't want Donald Trump to be sad because that itself would be sad, and then he would be petulant, and and the Depends budget would go through the roof. It would be just it would be a an international incident. So yeah, so they play a game, a political game, just like other organizations, and as they set up the term and the order of the cases, and at what point, whether it's early, late, those kind of things, so they can give the facade, give the impression of fair and balanced jurisprudence when we know the truth is something quite different. So, yeah. So there's your Supreme Court, there's your IEPA, and as the sleep, maybe you can see it bouncing off this. Yeah, if you didn't see this is not, people. That's U.S. Coast Guard, which I was not a coastie. I am not now a coastie, nor was I, and it's not one of those. Um, I'm not a member of a punk band, and it's not stolen glory. I don't hold myself out as a member of the Coast Guard. What it is being living in the Northeast and being cheap. So there are there are Army Navy stores that they sell lightly used gear from military branches, and invariably you can, as I've learned to my pleasure and that of my better half, time and time again, that you can get a $14 winter coat. This is more of a middle area, but a good coat, short money, and unlike everything that you buy today, don't I sound like an old man? It ain't gone in 2 years. It doesn't disintegrate, right? So this Coast Guard coat, which I am very fond of and have had for a decade, which did cost, in fact, $14. Um, this episode sponsored by Army Barracks. Army Barracks. All of your Army Navy clothing needs located in, amongst other places, Saugus, Massachusetts. Army Barracks. Go today. Support your country. No, it doesn't end. And they've, it's an Army Navy store that is a young boy and even an old boy's dream. I was going to say wet dream, but it's snow. It's not rain. That knives and guns and bows and arrows and more knives, bigger knives, ones that would make Crocodile Dundee jealous, big ass knives, and throwing star knives, and weaponry of all sorts. But more importantly, jackets and bomber jackets, and for the old guys like myself, maybe your grandfather needs another pair of cargo shorts, beige cargo shorts. They only have 9 million of them, and everything else in between. So this is an unpaid shout out to Army Barracks. Army Barracks. All of your Army Navy needs located at the mothership of Army Barracks was, and hopefully still is, because I'm running my mouth, in Saugus, Massachusetts, located on Route 1 North in Saugus. Shop today. Thank you, campers. And do your retweets and restacks and friends to subscribe are muchly appreciated, and we will do something. Perhaps I'll get my act together on what I was starting this morning, because it's interesting and terrifying at the amount of information they're gathering, visitors and U.S. citizens alike. And it isn't like we're not taking this information and reading a piece of paper and throwing it in the shredder. Oh no. This is your friends and mine at Palantir and other such companies are cataloging, cross-referencing, and feeding this information in and out of in AI Colito and getting it in the most workable form to weaponize it against you, sir and madam. So, yeah, it's alarming, and it's going to affect us going out, coming into the ingress, egress, outbound, inbound in the country. But in businesses like hospitality that are dependent on travel and tourism, it's going to affect people. Will people be hesitant? They don't want to come. Hey, come for the beatings, but stay for the intrusions on First Amendment rights. How's that? Did I sell the United States today? Right. If we didn't have enough trouble with the violence against black and brown people on our streets in America, now we're saying to people, when you come, give us all your shit, all your information. We want to know your 5-year search history and all of your handles for all of your social media accounts. And if you lie, because we got Palantir right behind us, and they'll tell us that you're misrepresenting the truth, you're screwed. You know, if you're on the outside and you lie, then you're not going to get in. If you're here and we found out you lie, we don't know the answer to that question yet. What are they going to do? Material misrepresentation about Elon Musk shit talking on X? Death penalty for me, right? But seriously, it's it is. If you ever, when you were a younger person, if you are an older person like myself, and when you first read Orwell, 1984, Animal Farm et al., and you read that stuff, and you said, "Yeah, I mean, dystopia, yeah, fine, but we're in America, not going to happen here." Hmm? Breaking news. Yeah. So, in any case, there's some material, and if there isn't another Supreme Court, they must be tired. They worked a full day or a half day, um, so they're probably not working this afternoon or tomorrow, unless there's some other. We attack Iran. We get confused and we attack Iraq again instead of Iran because there's 4 letters that begin with the first 3 letters are the same. Whatever happens, we of course will have a talk. But otherwise, I'm going to look at those other issues, and we'll tomorrow's uh, Saturday. But we'll be with you at some point, snow or otherwise. And thank you again for listening and sharing and restacking and all that fun stuff. So thanks, and have a beautiful day.